Picking up in the account of Jacob and Esau, which is one of the more acute examples in the Old Testament of the fact that the Bible is not a book about perfect people. It is a book about God's grace being shown to very imperfect people. So let's turn to Genesis chapter 25, and we'll begin reading at verse 19. Mary, do you have a Bible open?
I do.
Can you read verses 19 through 23?
Yes. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Aramean, to be his wife. And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah his wife conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is thus, why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger."
Thank you. So what common theme in the history of God's Old Testament people do we see repeated here with Jacob and his wife? No, not with Isaac and his wife. I'm going to start getting those names mixed up a lot, I've already found. So what problem did they have that his father and his wife also had?
Barrenness.
They were barrenness. We are told specifically that Isaac was 40 years old when he and Rebekah married, and then we're told later on in verse 26 that he was 60 years old when she gave birth to the sons. So we would assume, of course, that he was older than her. And this wasn't a situation where they didn't get pregnant for 2 months and then they assumed she's barren. This was an extremely drawn-out barrenness. Make sense? And why does God, we can't reach into God's mind to know exactly what he's thinking, but what is a reason why, as far as we can tell, God chooses to work through barrenness in the Old Testament and in the beginning of the New Testament?
Coming back to him.
Yes, he shows that he is unilaterally keeping his promise. So God promised Abraham that he would bless him with descendants that would be like the stars in the sky. You can't number them. And God shows that this wasn't just going to be him blessing the kids whom Abraham had through natural causes, that God completely gave that one child. And now in a similar way, God also does not bless the children whom Isaac and Rebekah have through the natural course of things. He waits for them to have to see that their children are a gift, not something that they just receive like everyone else. And we see this later on too, parents of John the Baptist, and then the pinnacle of it is Jesus. Now, why would it have been unusual, thinking about the prophecy that was given to Rebekah, why would it have been unusual in that time and place for an older son to serve a younger son? Nowadays, is this incredibly abnormal? Especially in America, we don't have this concept where the oldest child just gets everything or gets the vast majority of the possessions. So it would not be abnormal in this time and place for a younger sibling to be more economically and socially advanced than their older sibling. But back in those times, the oldest son was the heir. He would receive most, if not all, of the possessions. He would become the head of the household. And so that is why this prophecy given to Rebekah was so incredibly countercultural. God already knew ahead of time that he was going to bless the younger son, not the older son, even though, as we'll see as we continued reading, he was working through some deep personal failings in that family, and he was working through some sinful decisions and actions that they made. Now let's keep on reading. Audrey, could you please read verses 24 through 28?
When her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy cloak. So they called his name Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore him.
Thank you. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Please go ahead. 2 more verses. I stopped you too quick.
When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, quiet man dwelling in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob.
Thank you. So yesterday when we took the kids to the farm, one of the kids, I forget who it was riding on a small black pony, and she asked the farm worker what the pony's name was, and the worker said, Blackie. And I commented, and the worker chuckled, well, you didn't overthink that name, did you? They also did not overthink the names of Esau and Jacob, because in Hebrew, the meaning of Esau is hairy, and the meaning of Jacob is clings to heel. The meaning of the name Esau is hairy, and the meaning of the name Jacob is clings to the heel. So they simply named the boys on the basis of what they saw when they were born, which makes you maybe kind of second guess if you want to name one of your boys Esau nowadays. It's like, well, are you hairy or not? Now, what were Esau and Jacob like when they grew up into men?
Esau a hunter and
Yeah.
Jacob wasn't.
And it wasn't just that they were almost two caricatures from what we can tell. Esau was a man's man. He was a jock. He is someone who would have been a warlord. He was bigger, faster, and stronger, and Jacob wasn't. It's like Esau was a dog, and Jacob was an indoor cat. And how did this then bleed into their family dynamics? Did the parents love both their sons equally? Not as far as we can tell. That Isaac loved, Isaac loved Esau, and Rebekah loved Jacob. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they hated the other one, but they each had their favorite, and it was obvious. And that is sinful. Whenever you play favorites in a family, problems happen, as we see here and as we see elsewhere in the Old Testament. I mean, we can wrap our minds around why the father would have preferred the athlete and the mother would have preferred the quiet intellectual one, but that doesn't make it correct. Let's now hear verses 29 through 34. I'll read the next chunk, actually. Once, when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted." Therefore his name was now called Edom. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." Esau said to him, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear it to me now." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. When Esau was 40 years old, he took Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, to be his wife, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. So what do those verses tell us about Esau's character? Was he a thoughtful person? No. He was definitely in the moment. That is why I said that Esau and Jacob are almost like caricatures here.
Jacob was kind of a jerk too.
Yes, and we'll see that more as we go forward, is that he should have just given his brother some stew, but instead he took advantage of his brother's hunger and his idiocy and got him to trade lunch for the birthright. Now, of course, as Esau made this deal, he would have thought, this is not legally binding. No one is going to actually say that Jacob is now the head of the family just because he gave me stew and I said, fine, you can have the birthright. And it's not like Esau was actually starving. We talk about starving. My kids talk about how they're starving. And I'll even say I'm starving, even though whenever I say it, it's like, really? Are you starving? Maybe starving would be good for you. Like sometimes it's like, well, man, what I need is a famine, even though we wouldn't actually want that to happen. These verses show us that Esau was not a serious person, and he was also not a spiritually serious person. We see that not only from how he sold his birthright for lunch, but from what he did when he established his own family. That he married not one, but 2 Hittite women, and we're told that their married life and these women made life bitter for his parents. And this was not just because they didn't like how the women dressed or had their hair or how their voices sounded, but this would have been deeper bitterness. They were deeply saddened by the fact that Esau had grown up into being a spiritually indifferent person who had been perfectly happy marrying two of the local pagan women. So, we can kind of see now the stage being set for why God gave the prophecy that he did when Rebekah was still pregnant and having, we can assume, a difficult pregnancy. Questions, comments? All right, let's keep going then. Now let's get into the famous account. Mary, can you please read verses 1 through 10 of chapter 27?
Yes. When Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am." He said, "Behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me delicious food, such as I love, and bring it to me so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game and bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "I heard your father speak to your brother Esau. Bring me game and prepare for me delicious food, that I may eat it and bless you before the Lord before I die. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock and bring me two good young goats, so that I may prepare from them delicious food for your father, such as he loves. And you shall bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies." 1 through 10?
Yeah. So, was this stealing? Was this a stealing? This plan that Rebekah cooked up?
Yes.
Yeah. The fact that God had already said that the older would serve the younger does not change the fact that Rebekah was not here operating on pure God-serving principles. She was going to snatch the birthright from her older son, whom she did not prefer, and give it to her preferred son. This really was Isaac essentially writing his will. Back in those days, you did not write a will and say, "Oh, I'm giving this to this and this and this and this." You blessed your heir, the person to whom you were going to give all of your stuff. And so this was going to be a legally binding blessing. It was not a high five. This was going to be where Isaac conferred onto Esau all the duties and responsibilities of being the head of the household. Is there a question brewing in your mind? Okay, I thought I saw gears turning. But what are we reminded here? Whose birthright was this to give? It was God's. He was the one who was in control of these things. He was the one who had predicted what would happen. And so God was working through these sinful plans, even though it doesn't change the fact that they were sinful. It can be both serving God's purposes, and it can be wrong. Let's now hear verses 11 through 25. Audrey, would you like to read those, please? In chapter 27.
But Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, "Behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me and shall seem to be mocking him and bring a curse upon myself and not a blessing." His mother said to him, "Let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice and go. Bring them to me." So he went and he took them and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared delicious food such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her older son, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. And the skins of the young goats she put on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. And she put the delicious food and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob.
All the way to 25, actually.
going?
Yeah.
So when he went in to his father and said, "My father," he said, "Here am I. Who are you, my son?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you have told me. Now sit up and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me." But Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" He answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come near that I may feel you, my son. I know whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob went near to Isaac his father, who felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him, and he said, "Are you really my son Esau?" He answered, "I am." Then he said, "Bring near to me, that I may eat of my son's game and bless you." So he brought it near him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. And then his father Isaac said to him, "Come near and kiss me, my son." So he came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him.
Oh, actually, you can stop there real quick. Sorry, I'll let you keep going too far. So in the very it's a long account. So in the very beginning, when Rebekah said, "Let the curse be on me, just do what I say," what really did she mean there? Was she thinking spiritually or just temporally, probably?
I'll take the blame.
Yeah, like, if this goes south, I'll take the blame, you won't be in trouble, you won't get killed, all that kind of stuff. Which, of course, if Jacob was a principled man, he should have said, "No, I'm not really concerned with that. This is wrong. I don't want to be part of it." But he just went along with it. He just did what Mama said. So there's a lot of sinful actions going on here. But there's one thing in particular that should draw our attention. Jacob says, "Your God," what is the exact wording? "The Lord your God granted me success." That is not the way that a believer speaks. He would have said, "The Lord my God," or "The Lord our God," or simply, "The Lord God gave me success." But he said, "The Lord your God gave me success." So as to say, your God, not my God, was the one who blessed my success and the haste with which I caught the meal here.
Can I just clarify that for a second? Because he was pretending to be Esau. So was he speaking that way because that is how he truly felt, or because he was pretending to be Esau and he knew that was the way Esau would feel?
You know what? I've actually never contemplated that until right now. But there's one thing. That's a fair point. But the second thing I was going to say would be true regardless of whether or not he was saying this as himself or whether or not he was pretending to be his spiritually indifferent brother. He attached God's name and God's honor to the lie here. So let's go down the line of all the sins they were committing. He was committing the 7th commandment. He was stealing stuff. He was also committing the 9th commandment and the 10th commandments because he was going to steal the social standing and, quite literally, the house that by right should have belonged to his brother. He broke the 8th commandment because he was lying. And then, to top it all off, the sin cherry on top of the sin sundae was he broke the 2nd commandment. He attached God's name to all these things that he was doing. He essentially said, "I swear to God." And so that was the worst sin going on here. Fair question about the other thing. I actually don't know. But this was bad, plain and simple, and he attached God's name to all of it. Right?
Which does, when you put it in that context, it does seem to indicate some indifference. Like, he doesn't say, "Oh, well, I guess I just got lucky," or, attribute it to circumstances. Like, he attributes it to God.
And we remember, too, that the question, can one actually possess saving faith while simultaneously committing a thought-out sin? This was not a sin of omission. This was not a sin committed by mistake. This was intentional and thought out. That is why that's why as a pastor, even though I don't want you to commit any sins, I'm more concerned about you murdering someone than I am about getting a speeding ticket. Because the latter, it's not necessarily because you thought it out and said, I'm going to stick it to the government. I am going to give my piece to the cop. You were just making a mistake. But murder is thought out. You plan that ahead of time. And even our legal system distinguishes between that, because you'll have manslaughter and then you'll have the degrees of murder. So one of them is like, you didn't plan this, you didn't mean to, all the way up to, this was totally thought out. You knew what you were doing ahead of time. So now I'll read the next verses unless you have any other thoughts or questions. Then his father Isaac said to him, come near and kiss me, my son. So he came near and kissed him. And Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said, see, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of his father, Esau his brother came in from his hunting. He also prepared delicious food and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me. His father said to him, who are you? He answered, I am your son, your firstborn Esau. Then Esau trembled very violently and said, who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? And I ate it all before you came, and I have blessed him. Yes, and he shall be blessed. As soon as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said to his father, bless me, even me also, O my father. But he said, your brother came deceitfully and has taken away your blessing. Esau said, is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has cheated me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. Then he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? Isaac answered and said to Esau, behold, I have made him lord over you, and all his brothers I have given to him for servants, and with grain and wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son? Esau said to his father, have you but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. Now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. So, this is how it all played out. Jacob really did take what by legal right should have been his brother's, but we understand that this was simply fulfilling what God knew ahead of time was going to happen and how God had arranged for it to happen. And so we also know that Esau, his descendants, would also become a nation. They would become the nation of Edom, which was located to the southeast of Israel. And Edom generally had peaceful interactions with Israel for the most part. But we would say that verse 40 was fulfilled when the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem. We don't have to look it up now, but Obadiah 1 says that when the sons of Jacob were conquered, that Edom laughed and Edom participated in their destruction and in the looting and the murder. So we would assume that the Edomites had allied themselves with the Babylonians in conquering and pillaging Jerusalem and the Israelites.
So just out of curiosity, where would Edom be on a modern map?
Jordan. I mean, the modern maps are irrelevant, but yeah, we know Babylon was more or less Baghdad, give or take a little bit of distance. Yeah, that's where it would have been.
Okay.
So, why did Esau not do what we would expect him to do and just go kill Jacob right away? What reason did he give?
he wanted to let the mourning period pass?
Well, yeah, and that's pretty much it. But what does that mean? Who is mourning? That Esau realized his father wasn't going to be alive that much longer. And so he did not want to cause his father, whom he almost certainly preferred over his mother, especially right now, he did not want to cause his father any unnecessary grief or pain. And so he was going to let his father die. And then he was going to kill his brother and, in his mind, take back what should have been his all along. But we'll see if that would have actually worked. Mary, how about you read verses 42 through 46, please? That'll finish us up for today.
But the words of Esau, her older son, were told to Rebekah. So she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, Behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Laban, my brother, in Haran, and stay with him a while until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereft of you both in one day? Then Rebekah said to Isaac, I loathe my life because of the Hittite women. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women like these, one of the women of the land, what good will my life be to me?
Thank you. So Rebekah had a few purposes here, but one of them was obviously that Jacob would not be killed. But why was she also concerned with the well-being of Esau and told Jacob to flee? What would have happened if Esau would have killed his brother as he planned to? He would have been a murderer in the eyes of the law, and someone in the family would have been duty-bound to avenge Jacob's death by then killing Esau. And so essentially the same sort of warning the civil law gives to us for murder applied to Esau, that if he killed his brother, then his life would have also been made forfeit by that act of murder. And so Rebekah did not want both of her sons to die. But then we see a second motive she had for sending Jacob off to live with her brother is that she did not want her son, the son whom she understood God was going to bless as the next patriarch for the family, to have a spiritually and morally indifferent spouse like the spouses of Esau were. And so it is interesting that Esau would actually get all of the stuff that would come from having the birthright. Jacob ran away, and he did not take all the money. He left it all with Esau. But as Jacob ran away, just with the money in his pocket and the clothes on his back, he was the head of the family. And more importantly, he was the one whom God had identified as the new ancestor of the people of the promise. And so, as I said at the beginning of this session today, this account reminds us that the Bible is not a book about perfect people. The Bible is full of very flawed people, especially the Old Testament. Their sins and their shortcomings and their failures are laid out for us to see and examine as we have done today. But we realize that God chose them and he saved them by grace, just as he has done for us. We would also not want the moments when we were bad spouses or bad parents or just bad people in general to be recorded for future generations to see. If that was the case, then other people would also see, well, they were not saved through works, they were saved by grace. Now, comparing the preferential treatment that Isaac and Rebekah gave to their sons, we know that God does not have favoritism towards us. He says there is neither Jew nor Gentile, there is neither slave nor free. I think he says that there is neither male nor female, that God prefers all of his baptized children equally, and as we'll focus on today, God gives us his protection through his angels equally. Now, you would think that people along the lines of James or Brian, that maybe they have the angel with more energy But God doesn't prefer us. God watches over us and cares for us and saves us by grace equally. Any closing comments or questions?
I was listening from the stairs.
Yeah.
Seems to me like the common thing that causes people to do dumb stuff is not trusting that God will fulfill his promise. Because Jacob and his mother thought they had to do it themselves rather than trusting God.
Kind of also like how Sarah had said, well, why don't you have a child through surrogacy?
So I think that's a good lesson for us. Just trust that God will fulfill his promise in his time.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to connive these sketchy
Instead of forcing God's hand or helping God to keep his promises, just let him do it and live your life trusting that.
Yeah,
Good idea.
Thanks. It's not mine, but.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you.